When talking about iconic killers in horror cinema, two names always dominate the discussion, generating heated debates among fans: Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees. On one side, we have Michael, pure evil incarnate, an enigmatic and relentless figure, a silent predator with frightening strength and resilience that defies all human logic. On the other, Jason, an unstoppable monster, brutal and merciless, capable of turning any summer camp or town into a bloodbath. But between these two titans of horror, who is stronger? Who is more brutal? And, more importantly, what makes them so indestructible? Today, we're going to dive deep into the anatomy of Michael Myers to try to unravel the mysteries surrounding him and understand what makes him a truly indestructible killing machine. How does he survive so many injuries that would inevitably be fatal to any human being? What explains his superhuman strength? And what's the secret behind his almost immortal resilience? Before we begin this dark journey, I already want to know your opinion. Between Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, who do you think would emerge victorious in a direct confrontation? Leave your theory in the comments and let's get to the detailed analysis. Michael Myers, a name that instantly sends chills down your spine, evoking images of pure and unwavering terror. In 1978, horror master John Carpenter introduced the world to a new type of evil with his film Halloween, revolutionizing the genre and establishing the foundations of what we now know as slasher. At the center of this cinematic masterpiece was a villain who would transcend generations, a figure who would become synonymous with pure, unexplainable evil. Michael Myers isn't just his expressionless white mask that terrifies, but an entire set of physical, psychological, and possibly supernatural characteristics that make him a fascinating and terrifying enigma. Today, we're going to explore deeply the anatomy of Michael Myers, unraveling the mysteries behind this icon of terror that continues to haunt our nightmares almost 5 decades later, proving that evil never really dies. Before we dive into this macabre universe, we ask that you support us with a subscription to the channel. It's a small gesture that helps us tremendously to continue bringing quality content about the horror universe. Now, let's enter the mind and body of one of the most lethal and enigmatic killers in cinema history, trying to understand what drives him. The mental condition of Michael Myers is an abyss of darkness, a void that separates him from any concept of humanity and morality. Although many theorize about schizophrenia or antisocial personality, the truth is much more complex and disturbing. Dr. Samuel Loomis, his psychiatrist for 15 years, categorically stated, "I realized that what lived behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil." This statement suggests that Michael's condition transcends conventional clinical diagnoses. He exhibits a combination of seemingly contradictory behaviors, meticulous planning in his attacks, which contradicts the typical disorganization of severe schizophrenia, a selectivity of victims that is rarely random, suggesting a specific pattern or purpose, and full situational awareness, even in apparently catatonic states, as demonstrated in scenes where he pretends to be in a trance. His murders follow ritualistic patterns, indicating an internal system of logic that only he understands. In the novelization of the original film and in deleted scenes, there are suggestions that Michael hears internal voices, not as schizophrenic hallucinations, but as manifestations of the primordial evil that inhabits him, commanding his hatred for people. This mental structure makes him unpredictable and unreachable by logic or reason, a being that operates outside the limits of human understanding, a true enigma for psychiatry. Michael Myers' iconic white mask, originally a Captain Kirk mask from Star Trek, purchased for less than $2 and modified with white paint, enlarged eyes, and altered hair, is more than just a disguise. It's the physical manifestation of his essence. The mask promotes Michael's total dehumanization, removing any trace of humanity or individuality. Without facial expressions to interpret, he becomes a blank canvas where we project our deepest fears and darkest fantasies, making him a reflection of the terror that resides within ourselves. The symbolism of corrupted purity is evident in the white color, traditionally associated with innocence and purity, here perverted into a cold symbol of death and desolation. This visual contradiction intensifies the horror and disturbance he evokes, transforming a harmless object into an icon of dread. The parallel with ghosts is undeniable. The pale mask evokes images of specters and supernatural entities, reinforcing his almost ghostly and ethereal nature. It reflects Michael's emotional emptiness, serving as an extension of the mental condition that makes him an empty body driven by absolute evil. It's a symbolic analysis of the absence of face and expression, a mirror to our own inability to understand evil without form, without face, without apparent motivation. Interestingly, in the rare moments when we see him without the mask, he seems almost ordinary, an ordinary man, which makes the horror even more palpable. Behind the demonic figure, there is an ordinary human face, reminding us that true horror can often hide under a normal appearance. making it even more insidious and disturbing, as evil can be in anyone. Michael Myers' physical structure is a biological paradox that defies human understanding and modern medicine, bordering on the impossible. Standing at approximately 6'3" and weighing around 265 pounds, his robust constitution and dense musculature already make him an imposing and intimidating figure, capable of dominating his victims with frightening ease. His strength is extraordinary, allowing him to lift adults with one hand, keeping them suspended in the air, crush skulls with manual pressure, and tear doors from their hinges. Biomechanics experts estimate that some of his feats would require the strength equivalent to lifting more than 1,000 pounds, far beyond the human world record. His resistance to damage is equally superhuman. He survives multiple gunshots to vital areas, continues functioning after being repeatedly stabbed, recovers from falls from great heights without apparent impediment, and survives explosions and severe burns. In Halloween 2, from 1981, he suffers substantial blood loss and remains fully functional. In Halloween Kills, after being brutally attacked by an angry mob, suffering multiple penetrating and blunt trauma wounds, he not only survives, but gets up and massacres all his aggressors. This suggests anomalous metabolic processes. He's rarely, if ever, seen eating or drinking, can remain motionless for long periods without muscle atrophy, shows no fatigue even after extreme physical exertion, and exhibits accelerated healing, with severe injuries regenerating in an impossible time frame for humans. Possibly, he doesn't age normally, maintaining consistent strength over decades. His slow and methodical walk isn't just a stylistic choice, but suggests a unique neurological configuration, with extremely precise and controlled movements when attacking, the ability to remain completely still for hours or even days, superhuman reflexes demonstrated when defending against surprise attacks, and an inexplicable tolerance to powerful tranquilizers and sedatives. The enigma of Michael's eyes is another crucial and deeply disturbing point. Described as black holes, empty of emotion or humanity, they are frequently referenced as something abnormal. In Halloween from 1978, Laurie Strode injures him in the eye with a clothes hanger, causing significant damage. This injury persists in subsequent films of the original timeline, with his left eye appearing damaged or whitened. In Halloween 2, she hits both eyes with revolver shots, theoretically blinding him. However, he continues to move with perfect precision, which raises the fascinating question: does he really see through the eyes like we do, or does he perceive the world in a completely different way? Some theorists suggest that he can sense his victims through a supernatural connection, explaining his ability to find Laurie decade after decade, regardless of where she hides. This altered perception adds a layer of terror, as he is not limited by common human senses. A frequently misunderstood aspect of Michael is his relationship with sexuality and reproduction. Unlike other slasher killers, his motivation does not seem to have explicit sexual elements. His victims are not chosen primarily for sexual attractiveness or promiscuous behavior, although the original film has some of these characteristics. Michael's relationship with sexuality is more complex, possibly linked to the initiating trauma, the murder of his sister Judith after she had sexual relations with her boyfriend. This event seems to have created in Michael a fixation on the punishment of intimacy, not necessarily motivated by repressed desire. The controversial timeline of Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers, suggests that Michael was forced to impregnate his niece Jamie Lloyd as part of a cult ritual. This plotline was widely rejected by fans and critics, and subsequently removed from the franchise's official canon as being incompatible with the established nature of the character. Rob Zombie's version explored Michael's distorted sexuality more directly, but even in that interpretation, his homicidal impulses are not primarily motivated by sexual desire, but by a deeply rooted hatred and a distorted view of the world. Despite his relentless brutality, there are rare glimpses of something that could be interpreted as consciousness or even a remnant of humanity. The most notable is in Halloween 5, when, faced with his niece Jamie, he removes the mask and seems to shed a single tear. This moment is intensely debated among fans. Would it be a brief flash of his lost humanity, a remnant of family connection, or simply a form of manipulation to deceive his victim? This ambiguity adds another layer of complexity to the character, suggesting that, somewhere deep down, there may be an internal conflict, or perhaps it is just another proof of his predatory intelligence and capacity for dissimulation. Another point is his apparent inability to kill babies or young children, as seen in Halloween 2 and Halloween 5, where he spares Jamie Lloyd when she is a baby. This raises the question of whether there is a limit to his evil, or if his internal programming prevents him from hurting the most innocent, perhaps through a distorted memory of his own childhood. The most prominent explanation for Michael's immortality and compulsion comes from the Curse of Thorn, introduced in Halloween 6. According to this mythology, Michael was cursed by a druid cult that gave him superhuman strength and resistance, but forced him to kill all members of his lineage on Halloween night as a sacrifice to prevent a plague. The Thorn constellation, visible in the sky, would mark the time of the sacrifice. This curse transforms him into a pawn of a cosmic force, explaining his relentless nature and his focus on the Strode family. Although this narrative line is controversial and has been discarded in more recent timelines, it offers one of the few direct supernatural explanations for Michael's power, transforming him from a psychopath into a supernatural entity, a herald of an ancient evil. When comparing Michael Myers with other icons of terror, his anatomical and functional differences stand out, solidifying his unique place in the pantheon of villains. While Jason Voorhees, from Friday the 13th, represents the brute force and resilience of a relentless zombie, a being driven by revenge and primitive instinct, and Freddy Krueger, from A Nightmare on Elm Street, personifies the psychological terror that attacks the mind and dreams of his victims, manipulating their worst insecurities. Michael Myers is a terrifying and singular fusion. He possesses Jason's tremendous physical strength, capable of superhuman feats, but with a more subtle tactical intelligence and a more enigmatic motivation, which makes him less predictable and more enigmatic. His invulnerability resembles Jason's, but his presence is more silent and methodical, a predator that moves without haste, confident in his inevitability and in the certainty that he will reach his objective. Unlike Freddy, who feeds on the fear and psyche of his victims, Michael seems to be the very incarnation of evil, a void that consumes without need for emotional interaction or psychological manipulation, acting by a pure and inexplicable impulse. He is the personification of primordial evil, a force of nature that cannot be negotiated, understood, or contained, only feared in its purest and most relentless form. This distinction makes him a more visceral and existential terror, as he does not seek revenge or pleasure, but only the manifestation of evil in its rawest and unwavering form, an evil that simply is. The confrontation between medical and spiritual explanations is central to understanding the true nature of Michael Myers, and it is where much of his mystery and terror resides. Science tries to categorize him as an extreme psychopath with brain anomalies and insensitivity to pain, seeking rational explanations and clinical diagnoses for his aberrant behavior. However, the persistence of his survival of mortal injuries and the inexplicable nature of his actions, which defy any biological or psychological logic, lead to the hypothesis of the human body being merely a host for evil. This theory suggests that Michael Myers is not just a man, but a receptacle for an ancient evil force, which animates him and makes him indestructible. Michael's empty gaze, often described as black holes devoid of emotion or humanity, is not just a symptom of his psychological condition, but, for many, it is a sign of profound dissociation between body and soul. This suggests that what we see is just a physical shell for something much older, malevolent, and supernatural, an entity that inhabits his body and commands it. His ability to find Laurie Strode, regardless of where she hides, over decades and through different timelines, suggests a supernatural connection that transcends normal human perception, a mystical bond that guides him in his incessant and relentless hunt. This duality between the explainable and the inexplicable is what maintains the mystery and terror around Michael Myers, making him a figure that defies reason and understanding, a true enigma for humanity. Michael Myers exists in an enigmatic zone, a thin and disturbing border between human and monster, natural and supernatural. He is simultaneously a psychopath and a demonic entity, a relentless physical predator and the symbolic manifestation of evil in its purest and unalterable form. It is this fundamental ambiguity that makes him so persistently terrifying and an enduring icon of horror, capable of haunting the collective imagination for generations. We cannot fully comprehend him, and it is this incomprehension that prevents us from predicting his movements or completely neutralizing the threat he represents. As Dr. Loomis said, with a dark and prophetic wisdom, I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil. And perhaps that is the true anatomy of Michael Myers, not just a human body modified by supernatural forces, but the very essence of primordial evil taking human form to walk among us, a herald of darkness, a messenger of chaos. Michael Myers is what remains when the body continues alive, but the soul has been dead for a long time. He is the personification of evil that refuses to die, a constant reminder of the darkness that can inhabit the human heart, or perhaps something much older and cosmic. What's your theory about Michael Myers? Do you believe he is simply a psychopath with extraordinary resistance, or something more supernatural, an indomitable force of evil that transcends human understanding? Leave your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analyses of the greatest icons of terror. Until the next video, and remember, lock your doors this Halloween, because evil may be closer than you think, and it won't stop until it finds you, no matter where you hide.